get started with today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and it is not to substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. You should always speak with your physician or other healthcare professionals before doing any fasting, changing your diet in any way, taking or adjusting any medications or supplements, or adopting any treatment plan for a health problem. The use of any other products or services purchased by you as a result of this podcast does not create a healthcare provider-patient relationship between you and any of the experts affiliated with this podcast. Any information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. All right, and now we'll get started with today's episode.
Welcome back to another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. This is Dr. Terri Lance. Today, what I wanted to talk to you about are two big questions that often come up in groups within the fasting method community and with every client that I work with. These topics are a little different than what many of you are used to hearing me talk about, because normally I talk about the mindset and the behavioral issues, but these two topics are actually more focused on eating and how we decide what to eat, and then also the benefits of fasting. So the first topic that I wanted to talk about is a topic that comes up often when I work with new clients or when I do an intake with a new person. And I'm guessing it might also be a question that some of you out there might have based on listening to the podcast or reading some books or listening to some YouTube videos. And really the question is about what is the best way to eat? And I think oftentimes people assume or come to us believing that everyone that has any association with the fasting method believes in eating a ketogenic diet. I wanted to dispel that myth. That's really not what we teach. It's not what we hold everyone to. We have people in our community. We work with clients who are vegetarian, who are vegan, who are carnivore, who eat paleo, who eat according to a primal approach or other ways. But we do often think about some specific things that help you determine what is healthy for you. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today. It's not that TFM is a keto program or a low carb program necessarily. But what we do teach our people is that when you think about what creates or what constitutes a healthy meal for you, I encourage you to think about three broad categories of information. The first one is, what is the insulin response to this food? Because if you have followed us for a while, if you've read the obesity code or the diabetes code or know much about what we do, the insulin effect of food is really important. This is what contributes to insulin resistance. So not only is fasting important, but also the food you eat and how it affects your pancreas and liver and what they're going to have to do. So the first thing I would encourage you to think about is when you're making decisions about meal choices or meal planning, how will this food affect my insulin? Now, this is where people start to make decisions about carbohydrates or starches or certain other foods because some foods have a higher insulin response. And if we're working on lowering insulin resistance and keeping our insulin lower, we don't want to be eating a lot of food that has a high insulin response. So this is where you may learn and may hear about people choosing to eat lower carb because of the insulin response. I'm sure you've also heard in many Q&A episodes and different discussions that we have that other food groups can have a greater impact on insulin than some others. So for example, one of the reasons why we talk so much about potentially decreasing your dairy intake or eliminating dairy intake for some people is because of the insulin response. And in this example, it's not about the carbohydrates, it's about the insulinogenic nature of the food. The next thing I would encourage you to think about when you're figuring out what is a healthy meal for you or healthy food for you is the inflammation response. Do you have an inflammation response to that food, or is that food generally a food that causes inflammation? So you may hear us talk about seed oils, canola oil, vegetable oil, those kinds of things. And by nature, these things are pretty inflammatory. And when we have inflammation in our body, some of us are very aware of inflammation that you can sense and feel. Like if I eat too much dairy, I will definitely feel that in my hands, in my joints. It feels like an arthritic kind of response. So we often think of inflammation as this thing that we feel. Our knees are inflamed and sore, our hips are inflamed and sore, so we know this. But even bigger than that is the inflammation that can be in our system. So systemic inflammation is really more of what we're looking at when we talk about the inflammatory nature of certain foods. And with this, I want you to think a little bit about what happens when there's inflammation deeper in your body, not just in your joints that you know and you can feel. But for example, if your cells are inflamed, the membrane that encloses the cell is like swollen. It's puffy, it's inflamed. And therefore, the receptors that normally can poke through to receive hormones like insulin, like thyroid hormone, or like testosterone or progesterone, things like that. If the cell membrane is too inflamed, those receptors are not going to be able to absorb or receive those hormones. So even though you may have enough of that hormone in your bloodstream or in your body, you may not be absorbing it. And so inflammation, systemic inflammation, is really a problem. And obviously there's so much more coming out all the time about the nature of so many of our chronic diseases really tying into inflammation. So this is why I'm encouraging you to think about, what is the inflammatory nature of this food? Is this a naturally inflammatory food that I want to avoid or eliminate? Or is this a food that some people do well with, but I have an inflammatory response? So for example, I have had clients that have RA, rheumatoid arthritis, or something like that. And when they eat certain foods, like maybe some red peppers, something that I could eat all day long and not have a response, they would just eat a couple of bites of this, and within a couple of hours, their joints are very tender and painful. So they know they have an inflammatory response to that food. So that's the second criteria. And then the third criteria I encourage you to think about is, how do I feel, or what happens after I eat this food? So for example, if I eat a particular food or a meal and then feel very tired and need to take a nap within a few minutes of eating, this is a pretty good warning sign to me that this meal or this food doesn't work well for my body. So I might choose not to eat it again, or I might choose to have it infrequently. Or I might even want to do a little bit of digging in. What about this is causing this response? Another example would be if I eat a particular food or a particular meal, and then I'm really hungry an hour later or 2 hours later, when normally I can go 5 or 6 hours before I need to eat again. So what is it about this meal that created this instant hunger, or this hunger way before I am scheduled to eat again? Chances are really good it has a high insulin response, so it's going to trigger me to feel hunger. And then another example might be Do I have more cravings after I eat this food? So for example, if I eat a low carb treat early in the day, later in the day, I really don't feel like eating a healthy meal. I want more of that sweet snack kind of sensation. So that lets me know this is a food I need to be really careful about. So again, the 3 criteria I encourage you to think about, and this is not even going into macros or calories or portion sizes that everyone seems to spend a lot of time thinking about. More so, I want to encourage you to think about what impact does this food have on me as far as insulin response, inflammation, and then just how do I feel and what happens for me afterward. All right, so that was my first topic, talking about how to make decisions about what food works for you and what is healthy for you. The next topic that I want to cover comes up in most of my coaching discussions and many discussions in the community at large. The question, or what people are usually curious about, is why is it that so many of us do better or get better results from our fasting when we can get beyond the 24-hour fast? So this gets into 36-hour fast, 42-hour fast, 48, and beyond. Why is it that we refer to this as therapeutic? And why is it that so many people notice a big difference in the results they're getting once they get to that stage of fasting? So what I want to introduce you to is a concept that I describe to my clients and in the community, and that is the 3 amigos of fasting. Now, some of you may remember a film, I think it was from the mid-1980s, and it was called The 3 Amigos. Martin Short, Chevy Chase, and Steve Martin. So obviously it's a comedy, and basically these 3 banjo-playing guys are brought in to kind of save the day. And I think about this, and somehow I just kind of made that connection, the 3 amigos of fasting. Because when you get to that 24-hour mark, now these things start a little before that, but most people, when you go beyond 24-hour fast, these are the things that are going to kick in and really start to produce some of the results that you're looking for. So the first of the 3 amigos is autophagy. Many of you already know a good bit about autophagy, but just to summarize it, autophagy is your body's auto-cleaning mechanism. It goes in and it cleans out the junk. It cleans out the old deteriorating cells. It gets rid of the trash, basically. Really important. It's also a reason why many people in our community and who follow us, when they lose a significant amount of weight, they notice things like they don't have as much loose skin as they had when they did a previous weight loss system or something. So what is it that happens? The body goes in and kind of reabsorbs and uses up and breaks down this tissue. It's actually how we get some of our nutrients while fasting. Our body is breaking down some old proteins, and so we're kind of recycling some of those amino acids. So fasting amigo number 1 is autophagy. Fasting amigo number 2 is increased noradrenaline. And when you hear that word, I want you to think about adrenaline. It's that thing that gives us energy. It peps us up a little bit. This is why many people feel more energized while they're fasting. And if you think about increased energy, I want you also to think about what that translates into in your body: increased fat burning, breaking down body fat to use that energy. So oftentimes, this is one of the big reasons why people are fasting. They want to lose more body fat. So you want this fasting amigo number 2 to show up. And then fasting amigo number 3 is increased human growth hormone. Now, the way I think about this is human growth hormone is this really important hormone that we all have and want. But unfortunately, I'm not sure of the details, but I think it might be even as early as our late 20s, we start to have less production of human growth hormone. And this is not a great thing. Sometimes people hear me talk about human growth hormone and I can see it in their eyes. They look at me like, no, Terri, you don't understand. I don't want to grow more. I want to shrink. I want to get smaller. But when you think about human growth hormone, I want you to think about lean mass. Ideally, when we talk about weight loss, we don't just mean losing weight. What we really are referring to is losing body fat, releasing body fat, and we want our lean mass to either stay the same or increase. We want to gain more lean mass. It's more metabolically efficient than body fat. So it has so many benefits to us. So we want increased human growth hormone to help our body take the proteins, the amino acids, and synthesize those into lean mass. So these are the 3 amigos of fasting, but they don't come on stage really and get into the show until about hour 24. So when you do a 36-hour fast, you have had about 12 hours of the 3 amigos on stage. Autophagy is happening, increased energy, so increased fat burning is happening, and synthesizing lean mass out of your amino acids and proteins and things. So we want these 3 amigos on stage. These are some of the big reasons why people are doing these fasts. So if you're asking yourself, I've been doing 18 hours and I'm not really seeing much change in my body, or maybe even you've started doing some 24-hour fasts where you eat dinner the night before and then you don't eat until dinner today, that would be a 24-hour fast. You haven't yet gotten to the place where the big benefits really kick in. Now, please don't misunderstand. Doing that 18-hour, doing the 20-hour, the 22, the 24, those are all healthy things to do. Unfortunately, they just don't yet have the 3 amigos on stage. You're not getting that full benefit. So if you're thinking about your progress, what kind of changes you're seeing in your body, you may want to think about, am I lacking the 3 amigos? Would having the 3 amigos on board help me see the changes that I want to have happen? Would it help me to make the progress that I'm looking to make? Interestingly, the 2 topics I chose today, in my mind, each have 3 key pieces. The best way to eat, thinking about the 3 factors that you're going to pay attention to, and why would I want to do a fast beyond 24 hours? Having the 3 amigos. So thinking about, for both of these topics, those 3 things, I hope that this helps you to recognize some information that can help you really kind of up your game, so to speak, to really narrow in on food that works well for you, food that is not holding you back or delaying your progress, and these 3 amigos, these benefits of fasting that you really want to be in full force. Before we go today, I wanted to share one more thing with you, and that is something that is very exciting to me and to Megan Ramos. In January, we are doing a 5-week intensive masterclass program. Now, you can imagine what you know from us in this podcast. Megan Ramos is going to cover all of the information that you need to know about fasting, all of the ins and outs of how to fast, how to troubleshoot, when to use which strategies, how to understand the various protocols, what to know about electrolytes. Basically, it is the textbook on intermittent fasting. And then I get to do the part that I love the most, and that is focusing on the mindset, the behavior, the paradigm shifts that most of us have to do during this journey, the self-sabotage, the emotional eating, all of the things that make all of the information Megan is going to share kind of complicated for us to implement. And so this combination of getting all of these basics about fasting and all of this troubleshooting, and then all of this, how do I make this really work in the real world, in my mind and in my life? This is the place to get all of that in combination. So the masterclass runs from January 9th to February 12th. There will be 14 videos from Megan and 14 videos from me, and 4 live Q&A sessions with Megan and 4 workshops with me. And there also will be some bonus live sessions with other TFM coaches. You also will have access to the forum specifically for everyone in this masterclass. So I just wanted to put that out there, that if you've been kind of thinking about connecting with us, maybe doing some coaching or some more intensive work with us, here's a great opportunity. This link will be in the show notes, and you can find it on the website. I hope that all of you will consider this, and I look forward to seeing you as part of the masterclass in the winter, if that's what you decide to do. Until then, take good care, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the Fasting Method Podcast.